My dad used to say, paper does not have the ability to refuse ink. And there's another expression which is appropriate for today. Why let the truth get in the way of a good story? Today's story is about Ramon Novarro. Now, I have a shirt and I have this book that was written by a man named Kenneth Anger, a slanderer named Kenneth Anger, who made up terrible stories about people who weren't around to defend themselves. And one of the victims of those slanderous stories was Ramon Novarro and how he was murdered. Now, Ramon Novarro was a hugely successful movie star back in silent films, and he knew he was never going to get legendary status regarding, leading man status. So he took a back seat and he continued to act through the rest of his life, but he was sort of laid back, led a quiet life in his house on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, which is not quiet these days, as you'll see in just a moment. But the book, Hollywood Babylon, was written by Kenneth Anger, the slanderer. His response when he was called out was, well, no one sued me yet. And that's the case. And Kenneth Anger's now dead, and his horrible stories about people drowning in the toilet or having syphilis or whatever, they still exist, unfortunately. But this book changed me when I saw it for the first time. I thought, here's a book devoted to what I want to talk about. Then I learned it was nonsense. So I spent a lot of my career disproving the nonsense Kenneth Anger made up. Ramon Novarro was murdered in 1968. His method of murder was written about disrespectfully in this book, a certain murder weapon that Kenneth Anger made up, which did not exist. His murder was horrible enough, but Kenneth Anger made it humiliating, and his murder just didn't happen that way. And that's why I contacted Allan Ellenberger, who was the biographer of Ramon Novarro, who could clear up some of those stories, and he did for us. So stay tuned for that and my treacherous trip up Laurel Canyon Boulevard on foot. And let's disprove this stuff that Kenneth Anger wrote. Salacious, wonderful to read, not going to deny it, but lies. Keep in mind, some of the content in this story is of adult nature. There are no gruesome images, but some of the things that are going to be mentioned are of adult nature. So it's funny I have to preface a murder story with that, but I do. So there. The first thing I want to show you is the actual crime scene itself, Ramon's house. And it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. This side of Laurel Canyon is tough. It is very busy, very fast. I've passed Ramon's house hundreds of times, and the best you could do is a quick glance at it. So I decided to, try to make it so you could see a bit more by walking the whole route. But as you can see, it's quite treacherous and difficult to see. So I had to kind of do some fancy footwork to get down here. The sidewalk ran out, but I wanted to show you Ramon Novarro's house, and that's it over there. And it's sort of death-defying across this street. This is Laurel Canyon. It's not your hippie Laurel Canyon like it used to be. And but that's the house that Ramon Novarro was murdered in. And I'll be visiting his grave and talking to somebody who knows a lot about Ramon Novarro. So, and I've been up here a few years ago, so I took some pictures that I'll be able to show you a little bit more closely of the house. But you can see from over here, it's still largely intact. It was for sale a few years back. (3110) Laurel Canyon Boulevard. We're at Calvary Cemetery right now, and I'm with my buddy Allan Ellenberger, the esteemed author, and he's taking me to see Ramon Novarro, which I've not been to this grave in many, many years. And Allan wrote a book, the biography of the silent film star, Ramon Novarro, and generously agreed to meet me today. and pay our respects and talk a little bit about Ramon. And it is Ramon, right?
Yeah.
It's not Raymond.
Well, I know some people say Raymond, but I've always heard Ramon.
Here he is.
Somebody's been here, visit.
That's nice. And these are his parents?
Yeah. Do you want to go down and?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, this is his mother. This is his father. Next.
And where did they immigrate?
From Mexico, yeah.
Okay. So do you know how old Ramon was when they came over?
Well, he came with his brother Mario. Is it Mario? He's over there.
Oh, he's over here? Okay.
Yeah. There's 2 rows of them here. They came in the 19 teens, some there, I forget, 1913 or something like that. They came by themselves and went to Los Angeles, and then a few years later, the family came.
Okay.
Because they were, the Mexican War at the time with Pancho Villa and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They were very rich, and he was a dentist, and they lost everything in the war, so they didn't have nothing to lose, so they came to here, and Ramon ended up taking care of them once he became rich.
They lost all their money? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Did he ever have a boyfriend? By the way, this is Alan. Sorry, I'm just showing you now. Allan Ellenberger, my friend, and generously is coming out to talk about Ramon with me. So, but did Ramon have a significant person at one point?
In the early days, there were 2 that supposedly. One was Herb Howe. He was a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote for Photoplay and all those fan magazines, and he wrote a lot about Ramon. So, at the time, you wouldn't think anything of it, but looking back now, retrospectively, it's obvious that they had some kind of a relationship or friendship or something.
Do you know if he was ever the hush hush or the tattler or whatever it is? Do you know if they ever got a hold of him with any bribery scams?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
I've never seen any anyway. I think by that point, he wasn't really that big of a story,
Yeah.
Because he was in his 50s by then.
And when did he sort of stop being? I mean, he was the matinee idol. He was, a gorgeous leading man. Mm-hmm. Not quite the leading man anyone else turned out to be, right. But significant in that regard. And so his career sort of fizzled at what point?
1935, he went to Louis Lumiere and said, the films were getting worse and things like that.
Yeah.
So he just decided it was time to move on. But after that, he did some, films for some other studios. He did a foreign film, a couple foreign films in Mexico. He produced a film in Spanish, and then by the 50s, he started doing TV, and he was quite a regular on TV up until just a couple years before he died.
Was he doing any kind of the Batman circuit, that kind of stuff?
He never did Batman, but he did, Bonanza and High Chaparral.
So it's dignified roles.
Yeah. And Thriller. He did a couple for, Ida Lupino directed some kind of, I think it was Thriller.
Mm-hmm.
And she even went to his funeral. So he did stuff like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember everything he did. But
he never did anything like really campy, did he? No, like lighthearted television fluff.
No. His last movie was Heller in Pink Tights with Margaret O'Brien.
Okay.
I think George Cukor directed it.
Does she ever have anything nice to say? Well, does she have anything nice to say? Personally, she must.
Oh, she said he was a very nice man, and he, nobody said anything bad about him.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I haven't read anybody saying, "Oh, he was difficult, hard to work with." He did this, he did that. Everybody said he was a gentleman, and that he was pleasant and easy to work with. I mean, even back in the MGM days, I never heard anything.
When Valentino died in 32, was he? 26. He was 32 and 26, right? And Ramon Novarro was kind of going to be. They were kind of pushing him to be the next Valentino. Mm-hmm. Why do you think? Why, in your opinion, didn't just flush out? Why didn't?
I don't know. Unless it was the films he had just done, Ben-Hur. So he was very popular at that point when Valentino died.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I don't know whether it's a combination of his films, or Louis B. Mayer not pushing him, because Louis B. Mayer knew he was gay.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, I guess he would know all the secrets, wouldn't he?
Yeah, well, he got him out of a couple scrapes.
Oh, yeah.
In the late 20s and early 30s. He wanted him to get married, of course, and Ramon, resisted it. He wasn't like the other gay actor, William
Haynes.
William Haynes.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. He wasn't like William Haynes, who said, was very bold and upfront and everything like that, and just quit. I mean, because of his religion and his family, it had to be a secret. So, and that's where the turmoil started coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, the circumstances are, because Alan, you wrote the biography, or the end of Ramon Novarro's biography from my website. Find it that many years ago, probably 25 years ago, you wrote that, or
maybe.
Yeah. And it was important to me, and it was, I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but you did a talk at the Hollywood Heritage, at the barn one night, and doing it on Ramona, I think it was, and you did a Q&A, and I got a lot of shit in the audience for asking about the dildo. I didn't say dildo, but I said, can you, and then people are just like hissing, and and I'm like, no, it's a legit question because it's in print. Here's the expert, you're in front, you can tell the whole group.
Did I don't remember. Did you answer?
Well, you said, yeah, and then you said, no, there wasn't anything like that, and it's like, well, I think it's a legit question, but that's where I always go, though, me, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I want to know the truth, and that's a pretty fantastic, if that was true, that's a fantastic story.
Well, it would be, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no truth to it at all.
Yeah. But it's so funny how, those nuggets, like the dildo story, and the dildo story comes from, I just want to say, this book, and that's the main reason, I think Ramon should get recognition anyway, but the right kind of recognition. And this guy, Kenneth Anger, did a lot of damage to a lot of people's reputations that weren't around to fight back, to defend themselves. And Kenneth Anger was, I don't know if it was in the interview he said it, asked him to respond about his, the accusations. He said, well, nobody sued me yet. And that was the quote.
That's what, I look back at his since then, and no one's ever taken him to task that I've ever seen. And for all those stories that he did. I mean, in fact, while I was doing my research, I wrote him a letter. He was living in Palm Springs. I found his address. I sent him a letter, said, can I talk to you about Ramon Novarro? I didn't go into the details about the dildo because I didn't want to scare him off or whatever. So a few weeks later, I get this letter back from him. He was saying, oh, what a coincidence. I'm trying to pay for my move to Palm Springs, and I have this Ben-Hur poster for sale for $2,000. If you're interested, let me know. And that was it.
Yeah.
No, okay, yeah, I'll talk to you or anything like that, because I would have drove out there to interview him.
But and speaking of, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, just walk over here for a second, and I'll set this book down. And I want to read what he wrote. I was reading your story again, and it was so good, and so it's not really all that much about Ramon in here, is there? I mean,
no. And his death was so tragic and spectacular. Why make up something like that to just add to it? I mean, it was good enough as it was. The
truth was good enough. You're absolutely right. It says Ramon Novarro's ghastly death by beating in '68 brought to mind the bizarre crimes of Hollywood's past. Here was a man dying as he had lived, extravagantly choked on his own blood, which is true.
That's true.
The lead art deco dildo, which Valentino had given him 45 years earlier, thrust down his throat. Two dumb beast hustler brothers from Chicago, Paul and Tom Ferguson, chose October 31st, Halloween. It was the 30th, wasn't it? He died on Halloween. He died
on the 30th.
Yeah, which is same thing at River Phoenix. I just put that together today. They both, are attributed to Halloween deaths, but they actually were pronounced on Halloween, but died the day before.
Yeah, Novarro died between 9 and 9:30.
Let's see. To play Death Angels for the 69-year-old Ben-Hur. All the boys wanted was petty cash, $5,000, which, I don't know where that number comes from. Maybe which they'd heard from other hustler bums that Novarro had kept hidden in his Hollywood home, or that Yeah. They tore the place apart, ripping to pieces the mementos of his long career, which meant nothing to the greedy Cretan, souvenirs drenched in blood. So that's it, really. That's all he says, but that's what everyone remembers.
Yeah.
Hey, when they sold the house, it was up for sale. I don't know if did it eventually sell, do you know?
Yeah, it sold to a wannabe actor, and I can't remember his name. It's in my book. I talk about it, but he was kind of strange himself. He was a big fan of Navarro's. He dressed up like Navarro did in his younger days. He went around trying to buy up any furniture that was originally in the house.
Really?
And even decorated it to try to look like Navarro had the house when he was murdered. There's been rumors it's haunted, things like that. In the normal kind of stuff. So
It sold fairly recently though, didn't it again?
Well, I've heard that since then it's been sold several times over the last how long has it been? 30 some years? No, it's 69.
Well,
50 years.
Yeah, it's 55 this year.
Yeah.
But I mean, because when I was looking at my Ramon Novarro file on my computer, I saw several new images, probably from Redfin or Zillow or something, and I just wondered if you ever looked at those, like they might be, maybe you could make something out. Have you ever been in the house?
No.
No. That would be interesting to go in there, wouldn't it?
Yeah. If there's anything, I've been told there's still parts of the house that are still left, the original house.
Mm-hmm.
Navarro was the second owner.
So, okay, let's go to the 30th of October, 1968. And do you know, now Ramon Novarro was known to hire male prostitutes. So that wasn't a huge shocker. And which is how these guys probably thought he had money, because somebody said he's got money.
Well, the reason they thought he brought them in and he was entertaining them, and he heated up a chicken gizzard casserole. I don't know, maybe you like that. Anyway, so they're talking, and of course they're drinking, and he's giving them a tour of the house, and he had just built a music room on the one side. Probably wasn't too big. He goes, I put $5,000 into this room.
Oh.
They, dummies they are, thinking it went to him that he hid $5,000 in it. And that's how they got the idea, okay, we got to beat it out of him.
Yeah.
$5,000. And of course, there was none, and there's nothing he could do, and they just kept beating him and not giving him any mercy, and till he was dead.
Do you know if he knew these kids?
These two, no. He didn't know.
How did he find them? He had an escort service that he used.
He had an escort service, plus there was one guy, his name was Larry Ortega, who was a regular, and that they were friends. I think they were to the point where they didn't do sex anymore, they were just friends. And Paul, who was one of the
brothers?
The brothers, Larry was his brother-in-law. Paul married his Larry's sister Mary.
Okay.
So, and he knew that Paul did stuff like that occasionally, and he needed money. And so Larry thought, oh, well, Ramon had a reputation of being a soft touch. He was very generous. And, and not every time, there wouldn't always be sex involved. He could just bring someone up and entertain them or whatever. And if he was discriminating a little bit. If the guy wasn't really what he liked, he would just be friendly and give them a tip and send them off. So Larry gave Paul Navarro's telephone number and said, here, this guy's a soft touch, why don't you go?
Okay, by Paul we're saying Paul Ferguson?
Ferguson.
Okay, right. So that he is one of the two murderers.
Right.
Okay, just to clarify for people who don't know the story.
Right. So he went, he called Novarro and he said, hey, I got your name from Larry and can we come up? And he said, well, sure. And he said, well, I have a brother who is 17. Can I bring him with me? And Novarro said, sure, bring him up. Let's see what happens. So that's how they got I don't know if they got a taxi or somebody gave them a ride up the Laurel Canyon and dropped them off. Around 5:30 that night. And Navarro was in a a red silk robe, and he just showered, and he had cologne, and so he was already
kind of a romantic kind of
And so they just sat around and they talked and they played cards, and they had the chicken gizzard casserole, and they had drinks, of course. And then eventually it came to the point where what were they going to do? So Novarro was more attracted to Paul. So evidently they went into the bedroom, and he showed Tom to the guest bedroom. And Tom said, "Hey, can I use your phone?" And Novarro said, "Sure, help yourself." So while Paul and Novarro were in the bedroom, Tom was out either in the bedroom. He called his girlfriend in Chicago, Brenda Metcalf.
Mm-hmm.
They talked for like 48 minutes, which would be their activity. And during the phone call, they kept hearing screams coming from the bedroom, Novarro screaming and things like that. And Brenda, said, "What is going on?" He goes, "Oh, we're at this house of this big movie star." And it kept going, and then finally he said, "I better go see and make sure Paul doesn't hurt him." So he hung up, went into the bedroom, and Novarro was all bloodied and whatever. And he had been beaten with a cane, one of his canes.
He's still alive, though.
Oh, he was still alive. He was sitting on the edge of the bed. He was saying, he kept saying, like, Hail Mary or whatever.
I think it was the Lord's Prayer. I think you wrote,
something like
Our Father who art in heaven.
Something like
that. Yeah.
And he kept saying that over and over. And so evidently Tom felt sorry for him and took him into the shower and tried to wash the blood off. And in the meantime, Paul had gone through and got a hat. He was in his underwear, bloodied underwear. That's all he was wearing. And he had a cane, and he came to the door, and he was like dancing. And he said, "I should have been involved in it."
Oh, right, with the cane in the hat.
Cane in the hat, and twirling it, things like that.
Yeah.
And so they took him back and put him on the bed. Tom went out of the room for some reason, and Novarro started doing the Hail Marys or whatever.
Yeah.
And that upset Paul, and so he started beating him again. And he fell to the floor, and Tom came in and said, "What are you doing? I just left you." And so Novarro had fallen to the floor, and evidently he put his ear on his chest, and he couldn't hear any heartbeat. So they tied him up with a cord off of a lamp. They took the cord off of a lamp and tied his hands and his feet together.
In front of him?
No, behind him.
Okay.
And they put, in one hand, they put a pen. In the other hand, they put an unused condom. And they, on the sheet underneath him, they wrote Larry in big letters and put the pen in his hand, then turned him over on his back.
Okay.
And so then they took off their bloody clothes. They got some clothes out of Novarro's closet. They wrote. What am I allowed to say?
Anything. This is legit. These are facts. So it's all good. All good.
So they wrote on the mirror, us in red lipstick. "Us girls are better than faggots," and they spelled it F-A-G-I-T-S.
Don't they always? Remember Barney's Beanery? They did that too. So us girls are better than faggots. Right. Misspelled.
They're trying to make it look like it was a woman.
Did they scratch him or something?
They scratched.
That's right.
It looked. They interpreted it to be either a Z or an N and Tom later said he did that to make it look like it was a woman who did it.
So it really wouldn't have mattered if it was posthumous or not. I was just saying, because they could tell during the scraping if he was still alive or not, but It doesn't really matter.
Right. Technically I think he was still alive, but barely.
Mm-hmm.
So they went and they changed their clothes. They took their bloody clothes with them. They pulled the curtains. They shut out all the lights. They went out back, and behind the house is a hill. And they went up the hill. There was a fence, and they threw their bloody clothes over the fence.
That's pretty much after they dumped the clothes, they hitchhiked back home.
They hitchhiked back down Laurel Canyon, They got off in front of the famous drugstore, Schwab's.
Yeah.
And they looked at the clock and it was like 11 o'clock. And then they walked down to Hollywood, and just a little bit west of La Brea, there's a big, large, white apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty new then, but they had a friend that lived there, so they went there and they stayed the night there.
So they changed into Novarro's clothes?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So now I found this quote. I don't know where I got it. Maybe you're the one that wrote it. I don't remember. Sometimes I'll see stuff and I'll just cut and paste it to hang on to. And this would have been the anniversary, I guess, of Novarro's murder. It's 55 years ago this morning. 56 this year. It'll be 68. I kept going 69. It's 56 years. Ramon Novarro stars stage screen films was found by my friend and the actor's secretary, Edward Weber. Did you know Edward Weber?
I interviewed him on the phone. I never met him because he was living back east.
Okay. All right. Because I didn't know who wrote this, but like I said, I cut and pasted this. And he wrote what I really liked that he wrote was and having to do with what we're talking about. In the years since the florid imagination of Kenneth Anger did a great disservice to Novarro's career and work when he compounded an already tragic and numbingly sad occurrence by creating a fictional account of his murder in the book Hollywood Babylon, which was sold like hotcakes in Hollywood because the truth never gets in the way of a good story. The result, a pall was cast on the career of a great artist, and his final tragedy has unfortunately come to define his life and work. Just because it was printed and read by the public, every sordid detail must be true. I encourage you to look beyond the fiction and rather at the career of this singular artist that was in his day one of the greatest stars of cinema, adored around the globe, a true pioneer. And apparently I thought it was quite eloquent and really. I thought enough of it to cut and paste it. I wish I would have saved screen capture of it, so I knew who it was to attribute that to. But anyway.
Well, I know that they found things after he died. They found a cat of nine tails, and evidently his back was very scarred up because, do the penance.
Yeah.
He would do penance because.
It wasn't even a sex thing. It was a religious shame thing.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
He must have been so guilty.
Yeah.
About it, which is such a shame.
Boy, that's hardcore. I forgot that people did that. But yeah. Wow. Shoot. Yeah, and I imagine if detectives found that, they're kind of like, oh, what was this guy into? Look, he's got scars all over his back. So that probably didn't help. And I'm surprised Anger didn't get a hold of that little fact.
Yeah.
Because that would have been out of the whips and chains and things like that.
He wants to make it up. So.
Yeah, right. It's something you can use, and he won't. So, all right. So his body was discovered, and detectives are all over it, of course, as they would be. And they described the death was a mouth injury. It was.
Well, they knocked out a tooth. They found a tooth at the foot of the bed. They had, his nose was broken. He hit him with the cane, so he hit him in the face a little, I guess. And then hit him on the genitals all over. So when they tied him up, they put him on his back, and since they broke his nose, it was bleeding, and the blood dripped down into his throat. He drowned on his own blood. And the doctors at the time said, had they not put him on his back, he could have survived.
It sounds like it was a fairly routine injury. A lot of people break their noses and it bleeds, and they don't die from it.
But he had his hands tied behind his back, so he couldn't move. He was unconscious anyway. But that's a shame. I mean,
it is.
If they had just put him on his stomach or on his side, he probably wouldn't have died.
I wonder, do you think the intention was murder?
No, I don't think they intended to. I think he just got out of control because he had a temper problem anyway. He had been
the young, not Novarro.
No, the oldest, Paul. He had a temper problem, that was documented in the trial and things like that. So he just got mad, and especially when it came to Catholic things, because during the trial, Tom was testifying that about Novarro saying the Hail Marys and things like that, and Paul stood up and threw a pencil at him in the middle of the courtroom and said, he's only saying that because he knows I'm Catholic. You know, so evidently he had a problem with it too. So.
Even though he was gay for pay. And,
yeah.
Or he was gay for pay. He wasn't a gay, he was just a hustler.
Yeah, I think both of them I think were just gay for pay.
Male prostitutes, yeah. So when there were no fingerprints, were there? They didn't leave any fingerprints behind, I don't think.
They did, but okay, I think this is how I remember it. They did, but they weren't local. They were in Chicago, so they didn't have like it is today, where you can get. They had to send them away to places, but by that time they looked at the phone book and they saw there was a 48-minute call to Chicago on the night he died, at about the time that the coroner said that he died, around between 9 and 9:30. So they called the number and talked to Brenda, and she told him everything. Told him, the names, and it just took another day or two before they could track him down. I think in Bell Garden. I think that's where they were living. And they just walked in and arrested him.
Case closed. Well, aside from the trial, yeah. But I mean, the investigation was shut down, and they didn't need to do any more.
Right.
And as far, do you know what happened to the estate? I mean, how the probate, or the family got everything?
They didn't get. He left a lot of his memorabilia stuff to Edward Weber, the secretary.
Yeah.
But everything, his estate went to the family with his brothers and sisters.
Now Edward Weber's not still alive, is he?
No.
But he was a nice guy.
Yeah, he was a nice guy.
Yeah.
He was gay.
I would imagine that would have been an amazing interview too, because he knew him quite intimately, and I don't mean that in a sexual way.
No,
he did.
No.
But I mean,
he wouldn't have been Novarro.
Yeah. So but the details about his life that he knew would have been fascinating.
Novarro was working on an autobiography at the time, and Edward Weber was helping him.
Okay.
So I don't know whether he had what they had done. I think mostly all they had done was some recordings, tape recordings. I don't know if there's anything written.
That's too bad, because that would have been a good book.
Yeah.
That would have been a real good book.
But it was never finished, unfortunately.
So the two men, were, although one was 17, were arrested. They were both charged with first-degree murder, and then they kind of went against. They kind of turned against each other in the courtroom, didn't they? And as I understand it, the one that was 17 said, "Blame it on me because I won't get the death penalty," or something like that.
Well, at first, during the trial, they blamed it on each other, and they told each story. And in my book, I go into each of their sides, how they said, the scenario of how they said it happened. But then, once they were convicted, they had to have another trial to determine their sentence. Another.
Right. The sentencing hearing. Yeah.
So, in the meantime, their mother, talked to Tom and said, "You need to," just paraphrasing, "you need to be the one to take the blame for this because you're under 18.
Oh.
They won't give you the death penalty, but they'll give your brother the death penalty."
Okay.
And so he thought about it, and he came back, and when he testified during the second hearing, he told them, "I didn't kill Mr. Novarro, but I'm responsible for his death." And he said, Paul was drunk and unconscious in the bedroom, and Mr. Novarro came to me, and we had a sex act, oral copulation. Now, can you imagine a 17-year-old saying
oral
sex
copulation?
Act, oral copulation.
Yeah. I don't think they did blowjob back then.
Yeah.
Yes, that's an odd word for
I think he was coached, anyway.
Clearly.
But, and he said, and he tried to put his finger in my rectum, and I went ballistic, and I started beating him, because he didn't want to do that. Now, he said, so, it's his fault. They blamed him for dying, for them making him kill.
Did they talk about the $5,000 they were looking for?
It came up in the trial,
okay.
But then they did not admit to that, because if they would have admitted killing someone during burglary, that would have meant an automatic death sentence.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So they never took the rap for that. They said, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, but
Wow.
But it confused the jury so much. That testimony confused the jury so much that they just gave them both life sentences instead of giving Paul, because now they had doubts, thinking, well, maybe he did do it, but they were both responsible, so they both had to go to jail. But they weren't willing to give Paul the death sentence.
So the two young men were sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. Then shortly afterwards, the death penalty was overturned in California, and everyone on death row was eligible for parole, because at that point there was no such thing as life without parole. Somehow this kid, who was 17 at the time of the murders, who probably didn't actually have any physical interaction with Novarro, right? He was there, he participated in the sense that he was there, and he helped get rid of the clothes and stuff.
Well, if you listen to his last confession, he said that they had a sex act and.
Oh, it was him. Okay.
But I don't think that's true. I think he was just trying to help his brother not get the death penalty.
I see.
I personally think Paul was the actual murderer. I believe Tom's version of the story.
And it's still confusing to me because I know him as younger and older, but Tom is the younger one and Paul is the older one. Okay, so, and then Tom was paroled in 76, 77, something like that, early on.
I think he did 7 years.
Okay, and then Tom was paroled, and that's a fascinating story on its own, because they let him out in, do you know the year that they let him out?
I think it was 78.
All right, let's walk over to Ramon, if you don't mind, while we're talking about this. So, the older brother was released in 78?
Yes, he only did 9 years.
Huh. So he was released too. They were both out within 10 years. Mm-hmm. No kidding. Sentenced for life, that's California. Sentenced for life in prison and out in less than 10 years for murder. Now, his story after the murder, or after he was paroled, is pretty fascinating, because it made it clear they got the right guy the first time around, because he was arrested for, was it sodomy or something? Or
for evidently raping an 82-year-old woman.
Raping an 82-year-old woman.
And if I remember, he also had some kind of a crime with a underage girl. But he ended up going to jail. I think he went to jail and then got released and then went to jail again for something else. And then he got 30 years. And he was supposed, if he would have lived, he would have gotten out in 2022.
But he died.
He died in 2018.
And the younger one died too.
Well, he's even a little worse. He was arrested again. He went back to jail for raping a woman. And he went to jail, and eventually he was released again. I don't remember all the significant details. But in 2015, he killed himself. He supposedly cut his throat.
Geez, what kind of house did these guys grow up in? That is something that's...
The family was a broken family, but, that's a lot of broken families don't produce this kind of thing.
Right. And these two monsters, and here's this guy who is, say what you will about prostitution and whatever. Some people say it's a victimless crime. This guy was just out to have fun. He cooked these kids' meal. He was dressed nicely. And these guys signed up for it. They showed up for it, and it was supposed to be a nice, lovely evening.
I think he did it for the companionship. I think he was lonely.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't sex, wasn't involved every time.
Yeah, He was,
And he had the money, and he was very generous. People, all the locals knew he was generous, and that they wouldn't always have to have sex with him. Just sit around and talk and play cards and drink.
Yeah. Do you remember what day of the week it was?
Wednesday.
It was a Wednesday night.
Because there's a book out there. It's a fictionalized book. It's called Bloody Wednesday. It's a rare book. It's hard to find it. But it's fictionalized. But
wow. Well, I appreciate you coming out here, Alan. Thank you very much. And was it Dave Novarro? I guess is named after him.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, I think I asked him, or my friend Cece asked him, or she sent me something, because she kind of knows him. But I guess, and they didn't bother to correct the spelling, and he just stuck with it.
Yeah. Ramon or
Novarro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Evidently, yeah, there was a mistake. I've heard different stories of who picked his name.
Yeah.
You know, one was that he had a friend that had the last name Navarro, and another, Rex Ingram, picked it for him. But you know, I never could figure out which one was true, if any of them was true.
Well, he certainly made an impression, and I wish more people would see his movies. I wish I saw more of his movies.
Especially silent movies, but
yeah.
Mata Hari with Greta Garbo, I mean, what more, classic can you get?
Yeah. You tell me. I've not seen it. I'm terrible. But I would. I mean, I totally would, because I think...
Yeah, I think you'd enjoy it. It's Greta Garbo, I mean,
yeah.
and it's him, and it's just... he gives good performances.
So I just want to go to make sure, because I want to make sure that we talk about this. So your books, Miriam Hopkins, The Life of Miriam Hopkins, and the films, Life and Films of Miriam Hopkins.
It's her biography.
Okay, Anita Page, right. The Valentino Mystique, right. And Margaret O'Brien. And you're working on a Hollywood Forever book now?
Yeah.
And what's that? What's the premise? What is it?
It's a history from the very beginning of Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and I intersperse it with the story, the end of life stories of most of the people. Not most. There's too many, but a lot of the people that are buried there. A lot of the famous ones, and there's obscure ones that no one's ever heard of that have an interesting story that nobody knows. So. It's in chronological order, and I just go through history of the cemetery. Then when I get to a point where the person died, I do a couple of paragraphs of their death and the funeral and everything like that, and anything that's connected to the cemetery.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alan. Thank
Sure.
you very much for coming. I
welcome.
really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
More than 1,000 people filed past the open casket during the 6 hours the actor's body lay in state. A rosary was conducted on Sunday night, the 3rd of November, at St. Anne's Catholic Church in North Hollywood. The church was actually designed by Navarro's brother, Eduardo. The next morning, Monday, there was a requiem mass at the church, and Navarro's family attended, as did several friends from his Hollywood days, including Ida Lupino, Gilbert Roland, MGM publicist Howard Strickling, and actress Neil Hamilton, Les Tremayne, and Eddie Foy Jr. Producer William Self attended. Though he never met Novarro, he stated, "Ramon was very important to our industry." A fan attended because she remembered Ramon's kindness in answering a fan letter over 30 years prior. She says, "I think the old stars had something. They were terrific. Their acting was out of this world." She added, "He was such a good-looking man. It's too bad he never married." On Monday, a solemn requiem mass was held at 10 a.m. at the church, followed by his interment at Calvary Cemetery. So, eliminate what you read about Ramon Novarro in the book Hollywood Babylon, because it's just not true. It's literally fiction written by Kenneth Anger. Today, I spoke to Allan Ellenberger, who is a proper historian, wrote the biography on Ramon Novarro, and set the record straight, as it were. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. You heard me.